Alright, so now let me go ahead and slice. So that's a slice for my home navigation. Here's for flavors. Here's for pricing and ordering. And for special and gifts. Okay, so I have sliced. The next step, and I'm using my slice select tool, is to name it. So I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to call it Nav Home. Double click on flavors and call that Nav Flavors. Double click on this, Nav Pricing, double click on the one down here, and I'm calling that Nav Specials. Okay, so there I have my 4 off states names. So now I'm going to go ahead and optimize those. So I'm going to save for web and devices. Okay. And let me just magnify, zoom into this a little bit more. And we know because these are graphics, they're not photographs, that we can that we should optimize these out as GIFs. So I'm going to change my setting from JPEG to GIF. And we also can save all 4 of these. I'm going to select all 4, and notice how I get that little yellow outline. We can select all 4 of these and save them out all at one time at the same setting, because even probably with about 4 colors, well, you know what, I'm going to make it 8 because it was pixelating a little bit there. So I've saved all of those out at the same setting. And just to double check, if you want to double check, you can click on these and indeed see on the left hand side all of them are going to be optimized as GIFs with 8 colors. Okay, so now I'm ready to save this. So I'm going to say save. And here's my menu. Again, I'm not going to really pay attention to the save as, because that's really particular to if you're saving out just one image and I'm saving out several. But what is going to be different from anything I've shown you previously is that the format, instead of just choosing images only, we're going to choose HTML and images. And we're going to keep the other settings the same. So settings will be default settings. Slices will be all user slices. Okay? And I'm going to save this out. Again, let me just go to my desktop to show you my folder structure. So I have my Graphic Design 66 file, and I'm actually going to start a new folder here, and I'm going to call this Final Cupcake, because we're doing the page for Cupcake Mama. Okay. Okay, so I've created another folder. So I've got my Final Cupcake folder, but my slices, I still want that to live in a source file folder, because remember I had mentioned that I recommend that you save your slices out to a source file folder and then move them over to your final folder. So I'm going to open up this and call it CM Slices for Cupcake Mama Slices, and going to go ahead and save this out. Okay, so let's just look at our folder structure really quick. So let me hide Photoshop. We'll open up our folder, and sure enough, in our source file folder, in our CM Slices folder, you will see 2 things. You'll see the images folder that has my images in it, and there's also something we haven't seen before, which is an HTML file. And if I go ahead and just open that in Dreamweaver, what you'll see is it's created the HTML for your navigation. So what we're going to eventually do is insert rollovers into these table cells. So Photoshop can be really helpful in creating your table structure for your navigation. And again, this is a really simple navigation, but if you have a more complex navigation, you can see that this could be quite helpful. So let's go back to Photoshop because we have saved our off states, but now we need to save our on states. So I'm going to hide our off states and turn on our on states. Okay, so now we've got all of our pink swirls with our text. And the only thing that we have to do differently here is we need to rename these because if you notice when I double click on here, this says nav home, which is the same name as the brown text for the off state. So I'm just going to add onto the end of this name here for our on state. And I'm going to do that to all 4 images. Okay. And now I can go ahead and save these again, and they won't overwrite what I've already done because they have different names. So I'm going to go to Save for Web and Devices, and we don't need to do anything new here because we've already chosen our optimization settings here. So these are still set at GIF as a color. So I'm going to go ahead and say save, and then we get this menu again, which, you know, I really wouldn't have to save out the HTML again because it'll be the exact same thing as before, but I'll just keep that chosen here under Format. Settings will be default settings, and slices will be all user settings. And then just note that, again, we're saving these into our source file folder, into this folder that I just created called CM Slices for Cupcake Mama Slices. Okay? Okay, and it's just telling me that it's creating another HTML file and another spacer GIF, and I can just simply hit replace because that's fine. Okay, so let me hide Photoshop and let's look at our folder structure. And indeed what you see here in my image folder right here, and I'm going to double click on it so we'll look just at that, is that I have my on and my off state for all 4 navigational buttons, and also Dreamweaver has created a spacer GIF, and that's because, Photoshop has created a spacer GIF because Photoshop in this HTML file has created the table for that navigation and has used a spacer in this HTML. So we'll need that image also. Okay, so I'm going to go to my final cupcake folder right here. And as we know, I always need to have an images folder. So I'm going to create that. And I'm going to move all of these images that I just created into my images folder. Okay, so now I have all my navigation. And I'm also going to move my HTML here. And I'm going to show you in a second what I'm going to do with that. Sometimes what I like to do is just call this or rename this navigation.html. So this is the HTML I'm going to use to build my table, or I should say my navigation for my page. And normally you're going to use the same navigation throughout your entire site. So once you build your navigation one time, you should be able to use it on every other page.